Welcome to the Point of No Return podcast, an exploration of strategy, leadership, technology, and entrepreneurship. Your host, Nectar, is the co-founder and partner at the PNR, a strategy consulting firm based in Montreal.
Bonjour tout le monde. Welcome to another episode of the Point of No Return podcast. I hope that everyone's doing well. I'm excited for today's episode. Like I mentioned on the show, having this podcast is a bit of an excuse to catch up with people I respect and I haven't seen in a while. And I had the pleasure of speaking with Centech. For those of you that don't know, is one of the most successful university incubators in the world. And this is not just Richard saying it, this is validated externally as well. Centech occupies an important place in the Canadian startup ecosystem. It's really dedicated to high technology, deep tech, so to speak, through entrepreneurship, and really sits at this crossroads of innovative startups combined with a university ecosystem. Richard really dives into what it means to make a successful incubator. And we really spoke about being an incubator versus an accelerator. Richard also shared some excellent insights in terms of what it means to have talent density and competition for entrepreneurs. He also shared some really great insights about KPIs for startups, this notion of urgency, and the importance of learning from successes as well as failures. Richard is modest, yet has built one of the most successful startup accelerators out there. And if you're interested in the space, please don't miss this episode. Thank you. Richard, it's a real pleasure to have you on. Like I was telling you before, recording this podcast is an excuse that meet smart people and people I haven't seen in a few years. So I'm really happy that you're taking the time. Obviously, we're going to talk a lot about Centech. And I'm not sure if you've ever had the reflection about what makes a successful incubator. Having been the head of one, are you able to tease out any insights and say, hey, it's been a few years we can say we've had some success, obviously, with Centech. What would you say is the key to a successful incubator?
Oh, a very good question. It's not simple to answer to this question because there's a lot of different elements. First, to create a successful incubator, you need a lot of volume. So because 80 or 90% of the project that we are working will fail within the next year or the next 2 or 3 years. So at the end of the day, if you don't have any volume, it will be very hard to be successful. And I think this is one of our key elements. We can work with a lot of companies at the same time to figure out which one has the greatest potential to be successful. The second component of a successful incubator is to create density, because you want to create a strong community, peer-to-peer community that can support each other, that can challenge each other and evaluate together. And at the end, if some projects fails, you can attract the talent pool of the other projects to help your own companies to grow. The other component is to be sure that we align our entrepreneurs with real problems to solve. To build a startup is not a techno push. It's more a market pull. So do you have a good understanding of your market, of the problem that you want to solve? And did your solution really solve it? And after that, you have to figure out how much your client is ready to pay to solve this problem with this solution. And if you don't fix this equation, it's more sometimes a market push or a tech push more than a market pull. And I think in my mind, and I think this is one of the key element and what we do so different here at Centech is we align our entrepreneurs in this equation, because if you don't fix it, it will be very hard for them to scale. So it's not, there's a lot of programs who put a lot of focus on attract investors and VC and so on. But if you want to attract VCs and investors, you need sales. So if you don't have any sales because anybody wants to buy your solution because they don't want to solve the problem or it's too expensive to solve it, it's hard to attract investors. And after that, it's the scalability of the project. So if the market is major, huge, and so on, it will facilitate all of these processes. And I think these components was some key elements of what Centech was able to create in the last 5 years. Maybe another thing very important, so it's more global. So if you want to create a dynamic startup ecosystem, you have to figure out what are your main talent pool. So what are the strengths that you can find in universities, in research centers, and so on? For example, if you want to create startups in nuclear, for example, here in Quebec, we don't have any strengths. We don't have any major factories or producer, and we don't have major faculties in nuclear in Quebec. We have some experts for sure, but it's not a major talent pool. So you have to figure out what are our strengths. So for example, Centech is very good in manufacturing, in transport and logistics, telecom, microelectronic and telecom, and also energy. We are very good also in medical devices. We are good in it because we have ETS, we have Polytechnique, we have McGill universities, we have Université de Montreal, and many universities who has a lot of talent pool in these areas. And if you want to create the volume that you need and also create the density, you have to be very aware about where's your deal flow. And if you have a good understanding of where's the deal flow comes from, and you focus your subsectors align with this talent pool, it's easier for an incubator to be successful.
Yeah, it's fascinating. There's kind of three components, right? You mentioned one is, they're all super strategic. One is getting the volume, so having a tie-in with the university. Then the third piece you mentioned, but I'll mention it in the second, as my second point, was commercial viability. So exactly. What is the market problem? Even if it's, I guess that's going to be like the thing to tease out is because you're obviously working with startups, the market's maybe not quite there yet, but then how do you figure out enough signals to say, hey, there is an actual market problem? And then the last point, which you mentioned in second, that's what I want to dive into, is this notion of talent density, which I find fascinating. If you've read the book on Netflix where they talk a lot about that, right? So getting a lot of talented people in the same room. I'd be curious to hear you from a management perspective, because you spoke about strategically what makes it work, but now when you're what is the management kind of technique? Obviously, you've spoken about like human resources and having that hat on. How do you take this like hodgepodge of all different kinds of people, put them on the same roof, and have a culture and environment where there's a kind of co-opetition?
Yes, exactly. So we have to create a culture of urgency, and entrepreneurs, there's some competition between them, and that can create this urgency culture. To build startups, time is maybe the number one key that you have to follow, not the money, the time. So can I provide to our entrepreneurs some advices that can help them to save time, accelerate their networking, create this urgency culture, and create some competition between all of these entrepreneurs to accelerate their path, and also at the same time learn from others. And the fails are a learning. You can learn a lot from fails, but you can learn also a lot from successful companies. And in my mind, there's two different support that we have to provide to our companies. So the first one is from those who does this a few years ago. They have a lot of experience, they made it, and they have a lot of expertise that they've built by the time for the last 10 or 15 years. So they can provide a lot of very good advices to our companies. But at the same time, we need also the learning. We have to learn from those who made it 1, 2, or 3 years ago. because actually when you launch your startups, it's not the same as it was 15 years ago. So the environment is changing, the programs are changing, how you address problems with your clients, it's not the same perspective. So they have to learn from both. And this is how we've built our program. So Centech is by entrepreneurs, for entrepreneurs, and our program are based with successful serial entrepreneurs who manage and provide the coaching. And after that, on the second level, how we can use our recent alumni to provide learning and help the new one to accelerate their path.
Yeah, I love that concept of advice. It also has to be context driven, right? So building a startup 10, 15 years ago, very different than building one today where the market's moved.
Exactly.
How do you see your role then, Richard, as director general? Like, what do you see, like, the skill set that's needed for you to, have success in your role?
Oh, very good question. Basically, so I'm an imposter because...
Aren't we all?
I don't have any background in the startup world before I became the Centech CEO. My career was in HR to help leadership and how to manage teams and so on. And I had a team of 120 trainers who does a lot of programs with established companies. So when I became the Centech CEO, that was not because I was from for my startup expertise, but I had to figure out differently how we can fix what's the company needs and build our program based on their needs. So we tell to our entrepreneurs to be well connected with their clients, but sometimes I think incubator and accelerator are disconnected with their own clients. And my role is to be sure that we always well connected with what our startup needs, what we have to do to help them to accelerate their path and the pace of their development. And after that, figure out where's the market is going. For example, actually, I think the startup market is not the same as it was in five years ago. 5 years ago, that was more market for apps, web platform, a lot of B2C companies. But today, the startups world is shifting to deep tech companies, a lot of B2B, large corporations, and now SMEs starting to look for some startups who can help them to accelerate their own pace. And also government starts to look of what's going on in the startup world, and they want to figure, is it relevant for them to work with startup to accelerate their own pace? So I think the market is moving now, and the market is more complex than it was. So if you work with the large corporations, the go-to market is longer. So to think to build a unicorn in 2 years in the B2B market with large corporations, it will take time. So for a deep tech startup, especially in manufacturing, logistic, or medical devices, before to start to scale, it takes maybe 5 years. So after 5 years, you can figure out to scale. So how you manage the 0 to 5 years of these companies who has a lot of challenges because the sales cycle is a little bit longer, a little bit slower, and the level and the complexity of their product is higher than the average. So the burn rate is very high for them. So how we can support these companies? And I think 5 years ago, that was not the case, because a lot of entrepreneurs launch an app and they have a lot of traction, users and so on. You have a free app trial, and after that you sells your product with different business model around it. So that was more a marketing play. So if you have a lot of traction, a lot of buzz, and a lot of user that you can attract around your platform or your web app, investors was ready to invest in your company because they saw the traction, and after that we will figure out the real business model in a few years. So that was, and I think that was in my main. This is why it was more for VC a spray and pray period. But now today a spray and pray period. I think we are further than that, because as I said, the market is more the sales cycle is longer, and all of what I said in the last few minutes. So as a manager, I have to figure out how I can improve the support that we can provide to our company. And this is why actually we are looking to shift our support. Centech does a 0 to 2 years program. So we have a lot of services during that period, but now we are looking, what we can do 0 to 5 years, because they need more support if we want to increase the survival rate of our company.
Yeah, it's really inspiring to hear you talk, Richard. We're talking about before recording about deep tech and its importance, right? So we take out the phones and laptops from the room. It's like basically 1980. But the startups that you're working with and helping build are solving much more important societal problems, right? As we're recording this in March 2022, a lot of important problems left to be solved. So to dive into, double click on the support function, right? So maybe one of the areas you mentioned is obviously capital requirements is an issue, right? So like, how do you help support fund companies that have a higher burn rate? We're not solving, like, it's not a mobile app. It's not just like pixels. There's actually hardware. You obviously, you guys announced the fund last year, collaborating with a fund. So curious to hear about the strategy of helping support from a capital perspective.
Yeah, sure. We decided 3 years ago to have a better support to our companies to promote and create a fund connected to Centech, and then this is where Boreal Venture came from. And the challenge that we had at that period was, okay, we work with deep tech entrepreneurs, and there's not a lot of VC who are attracted by deep tech entrepreneurs, and some of them need money to accelerate their development. When you are, for example, an hardware company in medical devices or in manufacturing, the VC market was not ready to invest in these companies before the commercialization phase. But as I said, the go-to-market is longer, it's more cost intensive. So how we can put some money in our companies to use it as a leverage to attract other programs as prompts or R&D credits and so on. So you have to start, and I saw a problem right there. So how we can start this wheel for deep tech entrepreneurs. And this is why we decided to create Boreal Venture to help early stage deep tech companies to start this wheel. And when the wheel is started, it's easier for our companies to accelerate and be sure that they will be on the right path and attain their own KPIs. And after that, they will be more attractive for other investors.
Yeah, maybe to zoom out, like, give us a sense of the scale of Centech today, like number of startups, how many people have gone through capital raised, I'm curious to hear how you gauge success. From a numbers perspective.
Yeah, sure. A good question. Only last year, the companies that we have supported in the last 4 years attract only in 2021 150 million in capital. This is a great year. We are close of 400 millions in the last 3 years. We have created more than 1,000 jobs, well-paid jobs, because they are in the deep tech sectors. And only in sales in the last year, the sales of our companies was more than close to 55. Our companies are going very well. Some of them are, we don't know what's the end, so they are in the scale-up phase. But it took 5 years to build that ecosystem, but now we see the results. And this is, for us, the main matrix. So at the end of the day, it's not how many startups do you have in your ecosystem, it's how many companies that you have created and sell some product and export. So this is our main focus at Centech. So actually, we have 2 programs. So we have an acceleration programs that we do 2 or 3 times a year, We always select an average of 35 companies per cohort. And after that, we have our propulsion program where we support companies for 2 years. In our propulsion program, actually, we have 59 companies. And in our acceleration program, actually, we have 35 companies. So basically, we have always an average of 80 or 90 companies at Centech at the same time to help them to support. And it's, as I said at the beginning of this podcast, so there's two key components, volume and density. And this is why we have it in our mindset. So all we can create volume and density with high quality projects to create that community and be sure that we can push all of our companies to go further. And when we saw results in sales and investment and so on, that can create that competition within our incubator because they are proud for the other company, but at the same time, that these news challenge some of our other companies to do better.
Yeah, I guess my first reaction is well done, man. Because of course funding is a great metric of success, but when you mention the millions of sales, I think that's actual traction. It's people that are willing to spend to fund these companies, so it shows it's a real success. What's the next step, right? We're sitting here, we were speaking about your lack of space and how you guys are growing. Have you thought about the next evolution, like Centech 2 or 3.0, and
yes.
how?
Actually, we are working on it because I have a major concern, actually, especially for Quebec province and also for Montreal. When I see what's going on, for example, in Ontario or in other cities in the world, they actually built major innovation hub with large corporations, with services that they can attract a lot of startups because they want to work with these corporations and so on. And when I look what's going on in Quebec province, we don't have that kind of infrastructure. And if we want to stay competitive, we need to attract more corporations within our incubator and accelerate the sales pipeline. Because when you attract, for example, we have a few partners here. We work with Bell, we work with CAE, with Port of Montreal, with Thales, with Servier, and so on. And we want to increase the numbers of large corporations who work directly with us. And in our mindset, it's not only a sponsorship or a corporate innovation theater. What we have in mind is, okay, the future of innovation, in my mind, is when corporations will be able to tackle some challenges together, co-create innovative solutions by integrating some startup in their supply chain. So we want to build that major hub to be more competitive as what's going on in Ontario with Mars, with the future Reisman Innovation Center, Communitech, or Station F in Paris. We need to create that kind of infrastructure here in Montreal, and this is what we are working on. But in my mind, we have to be the next generation of that kind of ecosystem. So when you see at Station F, it's more a co-working space with large corporation and services. What I have in mind is, so if we have some large corporation with innovation teams working directly within the incubator with startups who has their headquarters directly in that ecosystem with events and labs and so on, that will accelerate innovation, sales, collaborations, and we have a main challenge here in Quebec, I think, is to commercialize our knowledge. But if you pull together all of these pieces on a day basis, we think that will be a major game changer for our startups.
It's interesting to hear you because you don't want to just necessarily copy paste that model, which works well. Obviously, you cited Mars and a few others, but you're thinking about what would be the 2025 or 2030 version, because we need to leapfrog. If we're already behind, and we don't want to just play catch up, we need to think about it.
And this is one of our philosophy: copy and create.
I'm gonna steal that.
Because if you do, in the startup world, so a lot of programs are based on the same model. So Y Combinator and Techstars was the main leaders of the new generation of incubators. And everybody in the last 5 years only tries to reproduce what Y Combinator and Techstar does and put some secret sauce. But in my mind, I want to disrupt that kind of model. So if I want to disrupt this model, I have to have a good understanding of what's going on, what's the good things in these programs, but at the same time, what we can add to go to the next step. And because if we don't have that mindset, it's just to reproduce what's going on somewhere else, somewhere in the world. So I don't want to be a follower. I want, as a CEO, I want to be sure that Centech is a leader. Centech is a benchmark. So if I want to be a leader as an organization and be a benchmark for other incubators, I have to improve my model and go further than what's going on elsewhere.
Yeah, I have to say, it's inspiring to hear you speak, and your passion about the space is infectious. I can't think of a better place to end the conversation, really. So I guess final question would be, if people want to learn more about Centech, the amazing work you guys are doing here, what would be the best way to connect?
Each month we have an information set, so you can go on our website, centech.co, and if you want to apply to a Centech program, come first in our information session. We take time with companies who has questions to figure out. And I have to say, our programs are free. We take no equity and no IP. Our job is to create value in our economy. Our business model is based on corporations and also government funding to build and manage our programs. So we don't want to build our funding on startups. Our job is to attract very good, the greatest startups that we have in Quebec province and elsewhere, to attract corporations and have the government funding. That was our business model. So there's not a lot of strings if you want to work with Centech, because our job on the basis is how we can help you. Because if you are successful, we can attract more sponsors, more corporations, and so on. Come to see us in one of our information sessions, centech.co. Maybe last thing, we have created 3 years ago our Collagen. So Collagen Lab is our program to attract large corporations who wants to be well connected with startups. So if you are a corporation and wants to work with us, send us an email by centech.co or find me on LinkedIn, Richard Chenier, CEO of Centech, and send me an email. And it will be a pleasure to see how we can help you and also how we can build together the future, especially with our next step, the Future Hub.
Richard, continued success, man. It's been great. It's great knowing you, and merci beaucoup.
Merci, Nectario. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Point of No Return podcast. Don't miss an episode by subscribing on iTunes or Google Play.